Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, Chapter 3, Powers. We have now come to the chapter in which the yoga powers are described. Aphorism. Dharana is holding the mind onto some particular object. Commentary. Dharana or concentration is when the mind holds on to some object either in the body or outside the body and keeps itself in that state. Aphorism. An unbroken flow of knowledge in that object is dhyana. Commentary. The mind tries to think of one object, to hold itself to one particular spot as the top of the head, the heart, etc. And if the mind succeeds in receiving the sensations only through that part of the body and through no other part, that would be dharana. And when the mind succeeds in keeping itself in that state for some time, it is called dhyana, meditation. Aphorism. When that, giving up all forms, reflects only the meaning, it is samadhi. Commentary. That comes when in meditation the form or the external part is given up. Suppose I were meditating on a book, and that I have gradually succeeded in concentrating the mind on it and perceiving only the internal sensations, the meaning, unexpressed in any form. That state of dhyana is called samadhi. Aphorism. These three, when practiced in regard to one object, is samyama. Commentary. When a man can direct his mind to any particular object and fix it there, and then keep it there for a long time, separating the object from the internal part, this is samyama, or dharana, dhyana and samadhi, one following the other and making one. The form of the thing is vanished, and only its meaning remains in mind. Aphorism. By the conquest of that comes light of knowledge. Commentary. When one has succeeded in making this samyama, all powers come under his control. This is the great instrument of the yogi. The objects of knowledge are infinite, and they are divided into the gross, grosser, grossest, and the fine, finer, and finest, and so on. This samyama should be first applied to gross things, and when you begin to get knowledge of this gross, slowly by stages, it should be brought to finer things. Aphorism. That should be employed in stages. Commentary. This is a note of warning not to attempt to go too fast. Aphorism. These three are more internal than those that precede. Commentary. Before these we had the pratyahara, the pranayama, the asana, the yama and the niyama. They are external parts of the three, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. When a man has attained them, he may attain to omniscience and omnipotence, but that would not be salvation. These three would not make the mind nirvikalpa, changeless, but would lead the seeds for getting bodies again. Only when the seeds are, as the yogis say, fried, do they lose the possibility of producing further plants. These powers cannot fry the seed. Aphorism. But even they are external to the seedless, or samadhi. Commentary. Compared with that seedless samadhi, therefore, even these are external. We have not yet reached the real samadhi, the highest but a lower stage, in which this universe still exists as we see it, and in which are all these powers. Aphorism. By the suppression of the disturbed impression of the mind, and by the rise of impressions of control, the mind, which persists in that moment of control, is said to attain the controlling modifications. Commentary. That is to say, in this first state of samadhi, the modifications of the mind have been controlled, but not perfectly, because if times were, there would be no modifications. If there is a modification which impels the mind to rush on through the senses, and the yogis try to control it, that very control itself will be a modification. One wave will be checked by another wave, so it will not be real samadhi, in which all the waves subside, as control itself will be a wave. Yet this lower samadhi is very much nearer to the higher samadhi than when the mind comes bubbling out. Aphorism. Its flow becomes steady by habit. Commentary. The flow of this continuous control of the mind becomes steady when practiced day after day, and the mind obtains the faculty of constant concentration. Aphorism. Taking in all sorts of objects and concentrating upon one object, these two powers being destroyed and manifested respectively, the chitta gets the modification called samadhi. Commentary. The mind takes up various objects, runs into all sorts of things. That is the lower state. There is a higher state of the mind when it takes up one object and excludes all other, of which samadhi is the result. Aphorism. The one-pointedness of the chitta is when the impression that is past and that which is present are similar. Commentary. How are we to know that the mind has been concentrated? Because the idea of time will vanish. The more time passes unnoticed, the more concentrated we are. In common life we see that when we are interested in a book, we do not note the time at all, and when we leave the book, we are often surprised to find how many hours have passed. All time will have the tendency to come and stand in the one present, so the definition is given. When the past and present come and stand in one, the mind is said to be concentrated. Aphorism. By this is explained the threefold transformation of form, time and state, in fine or gross matter and in the organs. Commentary. By the threefold changes in the mind stuff as to form, time, and state are explained the corresponding changes in gross and subtle matter and in the organs. Suppose there is a lump of gold. It is transformed into a bracelet and again into an earring. These are changes as to form. The same phenomena looked at from the standpoint of time gives us change as to time. Again, the bracelet or the earring may be bright or dull, thick or thin, and so on. This is a change as to the state. Now, referring to the aphorisms 9, 11, and 12, the mind stuff is changing into vrittis. This is change as to form. That it passes through past, present, and future moments of time is change as to time. That the impressions vary as to intensity within one particular period, say present, is change as to state. The concentrations taught in the preceding aphorisms were to give the yogi a voluntary control over the transformations of his mind stuff, which alone will enable him to make the samyama mind named in number 4. Aphorism. That which is acted upon by transformations either past, present, or yet to be manifested is the qualified. Commentary. That is to say, the qualified is the substance, which is being acted upon by and by the samskaras, and getting changed and being manifested always. Aphorism. The succession of changes is the cause of manifold and evolution. By making samyama on the three sorts of changes comes the knowledge of past and future. Commentary. We must not lose sight of the first definition of samyama. When the mind has attained to the state, when it identifies itself with the internal impression of the object, leaving the external, and when by long practice that is retained by the mind and the mind can get into that state in a moment, that is samyama. If a man in that state wants to know the past and present, he has to make a samyama on the changes in the samskaras. Some are working now at present, some have worked out, and some are waiting to work. So by making a samyama on these he knows the past and future. Aphorism. By making samyama on word, meaning, and knowledge, which are ordinarily confused, comes the knowledge of all animal sounds. Commentary. The word represents the external cause. The meaning represents the internal vibration that travels to the brain through the channels of the indriyas, conveying the external impression to the mind, and knowledge represents of the mind with which one comes perception. These three, confused, make our sense objects. Suppose I hear a word. There is first the external vibration, next the internal sensation carried to the mind by the organ of hearing. Then the mind reacts, and I know the word. The word I know is a mixture of the three, vibration, sensation, and reaction. Ordinarily these three are inseparable, but by practice the yogi can separate them. When a man has attained to this, if he makes a samyana of any sound, he understands the meaning which that sound was intended to express, whether it is made by man or by any other animal. Aphorism. By perceiving the impressions comes the knowledge of past lives. Commentary. Each experience that we have comes in the form of a wave in the chitta, and this subsides and becomes finer and finer, but is never lost. It remains there in minute form, and if we can bring this wave up again, it becomes memory. So if the yogi can make a samyama on these past impressions of the mind, he will begin to remember all his past lives. Aphorisms. By making samyama on the signs in another's body, knowledge of his mind comes. Commentary. Each man has particular signs on his body, which differentiate him from others. When the yogi makes a samyama on these signs, he knows the nature of the mind of that person. Aphorism. but not its contents, that not being the object of the samyama. Commentary. He would not know the contents of the mind by making a samyama on the body. That would be required of a twofold samyama. First on the signs in the body and then on the mind itself. The yogi would then know everything that is in the mind. Aphorism. By making samyama on the form of the body, the perceptibility of the form being obstructed and the power of manifestation in the eye being separated, the yogi's body becomes unseen. Commentary. A yogi standing in the midst of this room can apparently vanish. He does not really vanish, but he will not be seen by anyone. The forte and the body are, as it were, separated. You must remember that this can only be done when the yogi has attained to that power of concentration when form and the thing form have been separated. Then he makes a samyama on that, and the power to perceive forms is obstructed, because the powers of perceiving forms comes from the junction of form and the thing formed. Aphorism. By this the disappearance or concealment of words, which are being spoken, and such other things are also explained. Karma is of two kinds, soon to be fructified and late to be fructified. By making samyarna on these, or by the signs called arishta, portents, the yogis know the exact time of separation from their bodies. Commentary. When a yogi makes a samyama on his own karma, upon those impressions in his mind which are now working, and those which are just waiting to work, he knows exactly by those that are waiting when his body will fall. He knows when he will die, at what hour, even at what minute. The Hindus think very much of that knowledge or consciousness of the nearness of death, because it is taught in the Gita that the thoughts at the moment of departure are great powers in determining the next life. Aphorism. By making samyama on friendship, mercy, etc., the yogi excels in the respective qualities. By making samyama on the strength of the elephant and others, their respective strength comes to the yogi. Commentary. When a yogi has attained to the samyama and wants strength, he makes a samyama on the strength of the elephant and gets it. Infinite energy is at the disposal of everyone if he only knows how to get it. The yogi has discovered the science of getting it. Aphorism. By making samyama on the effulgent light comes the knowledge of the fine, the obstructed, and the remote. Commentary. When the yogi makes samyama on the effulgent light in the heart, he sees things which are very remote, things, for instance, that are happening in a distant place, and which are obstructed by mountain barriers, and also things which are very fine. Aphorism. By making samyama on the sun comes the knowledge of the world. On the moon comes the knowledge of the cluster of stars. On the pole star comes the knowledge of the motion of the stars. On the navel circle comes the knowledge of the constitution of the body. On the hollow of the throat comes cessation of hunger. Commentary. When a man is very hungry, if he can make samyama on the hollow of the throat, hunger ceases. Aphorism. On the nerve called kurma comes fixity of the body. Commentary. When he is practicing, the body is not disturbed. Aphorism. On the light emanating from the top of the head, sight of the siddhas. Commentary. Siddhas are beings who are a little above ghosts. When the yogi concentrates his mind on the top of his head, he will see these siddhas. The word siddha does not refer to those mere who have become free, a sense in which it is often used. Aphorism. Or by the power of pratapa, all knowledge. Commentary. All these can come without any samyama to the man who has the power of pratipa, spontaneous enlightenment from purity. When a man has risen to a high state of pratibha, he has that great light. All things are apparent to him. Everything comes to him naturally without making samyama. Aphorism. In the heart, knowledge of mind. Enjoyment comes from the non-discrimination of the soul and sattva, which are totally different because the latter's actions are for another. Samyama on the self-centered one gives knowledge of the Purusha. Commentary. All action of sattva, modification of prakriti, characterized by light and happiness, is for the soul. When sattva is free from egoism and illuminated with the pure intelligence of Purusha, it is called the self-centered one, because in that state it becomes independent of all relations. Aphorism. From that arises the knowledge belonging to pratibha and supernatural hearing, touching, seeing, taste, and smelling. These are obstacles to samadhi, but they are posters in the worldly state. Commentary. To the yogi, knowledge of the enjoyment of the world comes by the junction of the purusha and the mind. If he wants to make samyama on the knowledge that they are two different things, nature and soul, he gets knowledge of the purusha. From that arises discrimination. When he has got that discrimination, he gets the pratibha, the light of supreme genius. These powers, however, are obstructions to the attainment of the highest goal, the knowledge of the pure self and freedom. These are, as it were, to be met in the way, and if the yogi rejects them, he attains the highest. If he is tempted to acquire these, his further progress is barred. Aphorism. When the cause of bondage of the chitta has become loosened, the yogi, by his knowledge of its channel of activity or the nerves, enters another's body. Commentary. The yogi can enter a dead body and make it get up and move even while he himself is working in another body. Or he can enter a living body and hold that man's mind and organs in check, and for the time being, act through the body of that man. That is done by the yogi coming to this discrimination of purusha in nature. If he wants to enter another's body, he makes a samyama on that body and enters it, because not only is his soul omnipresent, but his mind also, as the yogi teaches. It is one bit of the universal mind. Now, however, it can only work through the nerve currents in the body. But when the yogi has loosened himself from these nerve currents, he can work through other things. Aphorism. By conquering the current called udana, the yogi does not sink in water or in swamps. He can walk on thorns, etc., and can die at will. Commentary. Udana is the name of the nerve current that governs the lungs and all the upper parts of the body. And when he is master of it, he becomes light in weight. He does not sink in water. He can walk on thorns and sword blades and stand in fire, and can depart this life whenever he likes. Aphorism. By the conquest of the current samsana, he is surrounded by a blaze of light. Commentary. Whenever he likes, light flashes from his body. Aphorism. By making samyama on the relation between the ear and the akasha comes divine hearing. Commentary. There is the akasha, the ether, and the instrument, the ear. By making samyama on them, the yogi gets supernormal hearing. He hears everything. Anything spoken or sounded miles away he can hear. Aphorism. By making samyama on the relation between the akasha and the body and becoming light as coal, cotton wool, etc., through meditation on them, the yogi goes through the skies. Commentary. This akasha is the material of the body. It is only akasha in a certain form that has become the body. If the yogi makes a samyama on this akasha material of his body, it acquires the lightness of akasha, and he can go anywhere through the air. So in the other case also. Aphorism. By making samyama on the real modifications of the mind outside of the body, called great disembodiedness, comes disappearance of the covering to light. Commentary. The mind in its foolishness thinks that it is working in its body. Why should I be bound by one system of nerves and put the ego only in one body if the mind is omnipresent? There is no reason why I should. The yogi wants to feel the ego wherever he likes. The mental waves which arrive in the absence of egoism in the body are called real modifications, or great disembodiedness. When he has succeeded in making samyama on these modifications, all covering to light goes away and all darkness and ignorance vanish. Everything appears to him to be full of knowledge. Aphorism. By making samyama on the gross and fine forms of the elements, their essential traits, the inherence of the gunas in them, and their contributing to the experience of the soul, comes mastery of the elements. Commentary. The yogi makes samyama on the elements, first on the gross and then on the finer states. This samyama is taken up more by a sect of the Buddhists. They take a lump of clay and make samyama on that, and gradually they begin to see the finer elements of which it is composed. And when they have known all the fine elements in it, they get power over that element. So with all the elements, the yogi can conquer them all. Aphorism. From that comes minuteness and the rest of the powers, glorification of the body, and indestructibleness of the bodily qualities. Commentary. This means that the yogi has attained the 8 powers. He can make himself as minute as a particle, or as huge as a mountain, as heavy as the earth, or as light as the air. He can reach anything he likes. He can rule everything he wants. He can conquer everything he wants, and so on. A lion will sit at his feet like a lamb, and all his desires will be fulfilled at will. Aphorism. The glorification of the body is beauty, complexion strength, adamantine hardness. Commentary. The body becomes indestructible. Nothing can injure it. Nothing can destroy it until the yogi wishes. Breaking the rod of time, he lives in this universe with his body. In the Vedas it is written that for that man there is no more disease, death, or pain. Aphorism. By making samyama on the objectivity and pointer of illumination of the organs, on egoism, the inherence of the gunas in them, and on their contributing to the experience of the soul, comes the conquest of the organs. Commentary. In the perception of external objects, the organs leave their place in the mind and go towards the object. This is followed by knowledge. Egoism also is present in the act. When a yogi makes samyama on these, and the other 2 by gradation, he conquers the organs. Take up anything that you see or feel, a book for instance. First concentrate the mind on it, then on the knowledge that is in the form of the book, and then on the ego that sees the book, and so on. By that practice all the organs will be conquered. Aphorism. From that comes to the body the power of rapid movement like the mind, power of the organs independently of the body, and conquest of nature. Commentary. Just as by the conquest of the elements comes glorified body, so from the conquest of the organs will come the above-mentioned powers. Aphorism. By making samyama on the discrimination between the sattva and the purusha, come omnipotence and omniscience. Commentary. When nature has been conquered, and the difference between the Purusha and nature realized, that the Purusha is indestructible, pure, and perfect, then come omnipotence and omniscience. Aphorism. By giving up even these powers comes the destruction of the very seed of evil, which leads to kaivalya. Commentary. He attains aloneness, independence, and becomes free. When one gives up even the ideas of omnipotence and omniscience, there comes entire rejection of enjoyment of the temptation from celestial beings. When the yogi has seen all these wonderful powers and rejected them, he reaches the goal. What are all these powers? Simple manifestations. They are no better than dreams. Even omnipotence is a dream. It depends on the mind. So long as there is a mind, it can be understood, but the goal is beyond even the mind. Aphorism. The yogi should not feel allured or flattered by the overtures of celestial beings for fear of evil again. Commentary. There are other dangers too. Gods and other beings come to tempt the yogi. They do not want anyone to be perfectly free. They are jealous, just as we are, and worse than us sometimes. They are very much afraid of losing their places. Those yogis who do not reach perfection die and become gods. Leaving the direct road, they go into one of the side streets and get these powers. Then again they have to be born. But he who is strong enough to withstand these temptations and go straight to the goal becomes free. Aphorism. By making samyama on a particle of time and its precession and succession comes discrimination. Commentary. How are we to avoid all these things, these divas and heavens and powers? By discrimination, by knowing good from evil. Therefore a samyama is given by which the power of discrimination can be strengthened, this by making a samyama on a particle of time and the time preceding and following it. Aphorism. Those things which cannot be differentiated by species, sign, and place, even they will be discriminated, bit the above samyama. Commentary. The misery that we suffer comes from ignorance, from non-discrimination between the real and the unreal. We all take the bad for the good, the dream for the reality. Soul is the only reality, and we have forgotten it. Body is the unreal dream, and we think we are all bodies. This non-discrimination is the cause of misery. It is caused by ignorance. When discrimination comes, it brings strength. And then alone can we avoid all these various ideas of body, heavens, and gods. This ignorance arises through differentiating by species, sign, and place. For instance, take a cow. The cow is differentiated from a dog by species. Even with the cows alone, how do we make the distinction between one cow and another? By signs. If two objects are exactly similar, they can be distinguished if they are in different places. When objects are so mixed up that even these differential will not help us, the power of discrimination acquired by the above-mentioned practice will give us the ability to distinguish them. The highest philosophy of the yogi is based upon this fact that the Purusha is pure and perfect, and is the only simple that exists in the universe. The body and mind are compounds, and yet we are ever identifying ourselves with them. This is the great mistake, that the distinction has been lost. When this power of discrimination has been attained, man sees that everything in this world, mental and physical, is a compound, and as such cannot be the Purusha. Aphorism. The saving knowledge is that knowledge of discrimination, which simultaneously covers all objects in all their variation. Commentary. Saving, because the knowledge takes the yogi across the ocean of birth and death. The whole of Prakriti, in all its states, subtle and gross, is within the grasp of this knowledge. There is no succession in perception by this knowledge. It takes in all things simultaneously at a glance. Aphorism. By the similarity of purity between the sattva and the Purusha comes kaivalya. Commentary. When the soul realizes that it depends on nothing in the universe, from gods to the lotus atom, that is called kaivalya, isolation and perfection. It is attained when this mixture of purity and impurity, called sattva, the intellect, has been made as pure as the Purusha itself. Then the sattva reflects only the unqualified essence of purity, which is the Purusha. End of chapter.